You open your eyes long before dawn, torn from a heavy, sticky sleep that brings no rest by the slow and relentless tolling of a bell. This sound does not seem like a call to bright prayer. It feels like a physical blow with a blunt metal object against your own skull, resonating in your teeth and bones. It is cold in the cell, so cold that the air seems thick and almost solid. Your first breath after waking escapes your mouth in dense white clouds of steam, which slowly rise and settle as frost on the rough, scratchy wool of the blanket. The blanket smells of dampness, the old sweat of many generations of monks, and mold that has eaten into the very stone of the walls, becoming an integral part of this place. Stone is everywhere here. It surrounds you on all sides like a crypt. It greedily drains grains of warmth from your body while you sleep, curled up in a ball. It presses down on you with its mute gray mass while you are awake, and it will inevitably become your final cold resting place when one of the four humors in your body finally goes out of balance and drags you into non existence. You slowly, overcoming the resistance of muscles stiffened during the night, lower your feet from the narrow bed. The cold stone of the floor instantly stings your bare soles, sending a shiver up your spine and reminding you that earthly life is primarily suffering, a test of the flesh, and any comfort is the lot of sinners or those naive souls who have not yet known the true, harsh essence of being. Your back aches with a dull, familiar, nagging pain that has lived between your shoulder blades and in your lower back for 30 years, ever since you, as a young novice, first picked up a heavy iron hoe. You grope in the pitch darkness for your sandals, the leather of which has hardened from time, moisture, and dirt, becoming like wood. You put them on, feeling the stiff, cracked straps habitually dig into old calluses, but you do not wince. You approach the basin of water to wash your face. The water is covered with a thin crust of ice. You break it with your fist, and the sound of cracking ice seems deafening in the silence of the cell. The icy water burns your face, washing away the remnants of sleep, but not the fatigue. Your habit, hanging on a rusty nail, is heavy and coarse. It scratches the skin like a hair shirt, but you stopped noticing this long ago, for your body is merely a tool given to you for a time, and tools should not complain about storage conditions or usage. You walk out into the long, endless dark corridor where the echo of the other brother's footsteps merges into a single, monotonous, shuffling hum. This sound is like the rustling of dry autumn leaves driven by the wind across an abandoned cemetery. You walk to Matins, a line of shadows in the twilight. The chapel smells of old wax, incense that cannot overpower the scent of dampness, and unwashed bodies. You kneel on the stone floor. Your knees crunch, responding with sharp pain, but you habitually ignore it. The prayer begins. A monotonous muttering in Latin, words you have repeated thousands and thousands of times so that they have lost their meaning, turning into a rhythmic hum that induces a trance. Your lips move automatically, but your thoughts are already far from the Psalms. They fly away there beyond the thick, impregnable walls of the main building to the enclosed garden where the black, heavy earth awaits your hands. You are a gardener, a healer, a keeper of herbs, and in this monastery, lost among endless swamps and dense forests, your role is far more important than the role of a scribe who merely copies others' wisdom by candlelight until the ink eats away his fingers and the smoke ruins his eyes. Your wisdom is different. It grows from dirt, from decay, from the very essence of life. After the long prayer, when the sky only began reluctantly to turn gray, taking on the sickly color of a rotten fish's belly, you go to the refectory. Breakfast is meager and silent, a piece of stale bread that must be soaked for a long time in watery porridge so as not to break your teeth, and a mug of water. You chew slowly, staring at a single point, tasting grain and ash. Then you stand up and go to the exit into the courtyard. The air outside is damp and piercing. You go to your garden. This is not the garden that idle minstrels sing of in castles, where beautiful ladies in silks stroll and roses bloom without thorns for the sake of beauty alone. No, your garden is a battlefield for survival, a harsh and utilitarian place. It smells of manure, which you personally hauled in heavy wooden buckets last autumn, straining your back. It smells of greasy, damp earth and slowly decomposing organic matter. This smell is heavy, dense. It clogs the nostrils, settles as a taste on the tongue, and permeates clothing. But for you, it is the smell of life itself, cyclical and endless. You open the creaking wooden gate, swollen with moisture, and the first thing you hear is a deafening silence, broken only by the distant, sleepy, deep buzzing of an awakened bee flying out on reconnaissance. Your day begins with a thorough, slow inspection of your domain. Every step is taken with effort because the night mud here is sticky, greasy, clay-like. It greedily grabs the soles of your sandals, sticking to them in heavy clumps, as if trying to drag you down underground to where the white bones of your predecessors lie. You approach the sage bed. Sage is salvation. It is a sacred herb, a savior of life, for its nature, according to ancient treatises, is hot and dry. You sink heavily with a sigh to your knees right in the mud, and the moisture instantly soaks through the coarse fabric of your habit, chilling the skin of your knees. You look at the oblong sage leaves covered with soft, silvery fuzz, and you see in them not aesthetic beauty, but a powerful tool for fighting cold and wet phlegm. Phlegm is insidious. It accumulates in the chests of old monks in winter, causing them to wheeze and suffocate. You know that if Brother Thomas, who has been coughing for a week, starts spitting up thick, clear mucus, only a strong, bitter decoction of sage can disperse this moisture, drying it out with its internal heat. You reach out a hand, knobby, with black earth ingrained in deep cracks that cannot be washed away by soap or river sand, and carefully pluck a few lower leaves. They feel rough to the touch, like a cat's dry tongue. You slowly rub them between your thumb and forefinger, and a sharp, piercing camphor scent hits your nose, instantly clearing your head better than any church incense. This smell is a promise of health, or at least a temporary reprieve from inevitable death. You begin weeding. It is an endless, monotonous process. Weeds are enemies, spawn of primordial chaos, consequences of Adam's fall. They crawl everywhere, brazen and tenacious, sucking precious juices from noble plants. You pull them out one by one, methodically, mechanically, not missing a single sprout. Nettles viciously sting your fingers, leaving white blisters that immediately begin to itch, but you do not stop and do not blow on your fingers. Pain is a good reminder that you are still alive and capable of feeling. You pull out tenacious goosefoot creeping couch grass with its endless white roots resembling worms. You pull out fleshy dandelions. Your nails are black and broken. Dirt accumulates under them, mixed with the green juice of plants and your own blood from small scratches. You work for an hour, two, three. Time stops here, dissolving in the monotony of movements. Bend, grasp, pull, discard. Bend, grasp, pull. The sun, slowly, as if reluctantly, rises higher, but it barely warms through the gray veil of clouds, merely illuminating the wretchedness of existence with pale light. You straighten your back with difficulty and move to the next bed, to the hyssop. This plant is true fire enclosed in a stiff, woody stem. Its nature is hot and dry in the third degree, which makes it a dangerous and powerful medicine. You look at the small blue flowers gathered in spike-like inflorescences and think of black bile. Melancholy is the scourge of the monastery's cloistered life. An excess of black bile, thick as tar, makes the brothers despondent, depressed, forces them to see the devil in dancing shadows from a candle and doubt the mercy of the Lord. Hyssop purges, burns out this filth. You remember how last winter Brother Jeremiah fell into a deep stupor, staring at the stone wall for 3 days straight and refusing food until you forcibly fed him a bitter decoction of hyssop with honey, forcing his stomach to expel everything superfluous in agonizing spasms. It was a dirty, foul-smelling, humiliating business, but such is medicine, filth against filth, like cures like. You take the old hoe, the handle of which has been polished to a mirror, shine by your palms over decades of labor, and begin to loosen the earth around the hyssop roots. The sound of metal striking stony ground is dull, rhythmic. Thud, scuff, thud, scuff. This sound hypnotizes, plunges into a semblance of a trance. You think of nothing. Your thoughts flow slowly, like cooling pitch. You check every bush, turn over leaves. Look for aphids, look for signs of rot or rust. If you find a sick leaf, you must ruthlessly cut it off with a knife so that the infection does not spread to the rest of the healthy parts. So it is with people you think detachedly, but immediately banish this thought, crossing yourself, for pride is a grievous sin. Nearby grows lavender, a whole field of gray, modest bushes, as if covered with ash or the dust of centuries. Lavender is needed for the head and nerves. It strengthens the brain, which, as is known from the works of Galen, is cold and wet by nature, and therefore prone to stagnation. The smell of lavender here in the open bed is nothing like in the chests of clean linen of the rich nobility. Here it is coarse, mixed with the smell of damp earth, rotting foliage, and your own sour sweat. Bees adore lavender. You see them, hundreds of furry, striped workers, the only creatures in this world who work more and harder than you. Their buzzing gets louder as the day comes into its own. It is a low, vibrating, thick sound that penetrates the ears, fills the head, and creates a feeling of cottony, dense silence around, cutting you off from the rest of the world. You freeze and watch a heavy bee land on a tiny flower, how it busily fusses there, collecting precious nectar. You know that their labor will give you not only honey, but also wax. Wax is vitally needed for ointments and plasters. Everything in this garden is connected by a single, unbreakable chain of necessity. There is nothing superfluous, nothing for simple pleasure or idleness. Even the beauty of a flower is merely a lure for an insect, a trick of nature. You continue to crawl on your knees along the endless bed, tearing out weeds, feeling your joints begin to ache unbearably, feeling your lower back fill with heaviness. At your age, knees crunch with every movement like breaking dry branches, and your back no longer straightens completely, forever making you look like a bent question mark. Then you go to the compost heap in the far corner of the garden. This is also part of your work. Here, scraps from the kitchen, rotten vegetables, the contents of chamber pots are brought. The smell here is such that an unaccustomed person's eyes would water, but you breathe evenly. You take a pitchfork and begin to turn this heavy, wet mass. It steams in the cold. Inside the pile, a mysterious alchemy is taking place. Death turns into life. Decay generates heat. Heat generates new earth that will feed new plants. You see fat white worms writhing in the humus. They are your helpers. You work methodically, layer by layer, feeling sweat run down your back under your habit, causing an itch, but you cannot scratch. Your hands are in manure. When the sun, invisible behind the clouds, reaches its zenith, the bell rings. Time for the midday meal. You leave your tools, wash your hands in a barrel of rainwater. The water is turbid, greenish, and go to the refectory. Lunch passes in complete silence, broken only by the clatter of wooden spoons against wooden bowls and chewing. The reader at the lectern monotonously drones a chapter from the Holy Scripture. Today, for lunch, there are boiled turnips and a little salted fish, tough as a sole. You eat to fill the void in your stomach, tasting nothing. After the meal, work again. You head to the drying room. This is a space under the very roof of one of the outbuildings, an attic where eternal twilight reigns. It is hot here, much hotter than outside, and dark. The only light breaks through cracks in the old roof tiles and through a dormer window, in whose beams myriads of golden dust motes dance. The air here is dry, dense, saturated with the concentrated aromas of hundreds of plants dying a slow death for the health of the living. Here it smells of peppermint, bitter wormwood, thyme, Swedish valerian, and spicy yarrow. This smell is so thick and complex that it seems it could be cut with a knife and stacked in slices. You hear a rustling. It is not rats. You ruthlessly poison rats with poisonous hellebore. It is the dry bundles of herbs rustling, suspended under the ceiling, swayed by a draft. Shh, 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 a dry, parchment sound. You take the freshly cut bundles you brought with you in a basket and begin to tie them. The rope is coarse, hempen, hairy. It cuts fingers, leaving small abrasions. You make a loop, tighten a strong knot, check reliability. This is monotonous meditative work. One bundle, a second, a tenth, a 50th. You climb a shaky ladder and hang them upside down from the beams. In the darkness, the hanging bundles look like sleeping bats or the severed heads of strange creatures. You must watch carefully so that the herbs do not touch each other, must leave a gap for air. Otherwise, mold will start, and all your labor will be in vain. Mold is another enemy, quiet, insidious, and ubiquitous. It loves moisture, stagnation, and darkness, much like sin in the soul of man. The theory of humors requires precision and deep understanding. You know by heart that blood is hot and wet, air. Yellow bile is hot and dry, fire. Black bile is cold and dry, earth. And phlegm is cold and wet, water. Illness is not a punishment, but a disturbance of balance, a disharmony of elements. If the abbot's liver aches and he becomes wrathful, it means too much heat and fire are raging in him, and you must give him something cooling and wet, for example, chicory, purslane, or lettuce to extinguish this internal fire. But you do not just give an herb, you prepare a complex medicine. Now you need to make a healing ointment for the brother porter who has a trophic ulcer opened on his leg, oozing foul, fetid ichor, which has not healed for a month. You go down to your laboratory, a small cramped closet without windows, attached to the back wall of the kitchen. Here it smells of burning, soot, old rags, and rendered fat. You light a fire in a small stone hearth. The firewood must be perfectly dry, birch or oak, to give even heat and not smoke, but the acrid smoke still eats at the eyes, forcing you to squint. You take a clay pot, old, soot-covered, with a chipped rim, which has served you for many years, and put a large piece of pork leaf lard into it. The lard is white, cold, slippery, unpleasant to the touch. You place the pot on a trivet over the fire and wait. You wait a long time. The lard begins to melt, turning into a clear, sizzling liquid. You stir it with a long wooden spoon, and this sound, plop, 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 lulls, induces a stupor. Then you take a piece of beeswax, a yellow, dense, fragrant ingot that you rendered from honeycombs yourself last month. You crumble it with a knife into the hot fat. The wax melts slowly, reluctantly, mixing with the lard, changing the color of the mixture to a noble golden. Now, the most important thing, herbs. You take dried St. John's wort, from it the oil will turn red, like the blood of Christ, and dried plantain. You put them in a stone mortar. The mortar is heavy, granite. The pestle fits comfortably in the hand like a weapon. The crunch of dry leaves and brittle stems under the pestle is loud in the silence of the room. Krr, krr. You grind the plants into a fine green powder, into dust. You carefully pour this dust into the boiling fat. The mixture instantly boils up, hisses, spits hot splashes, rises in a high foamy cap. You stir quickly and vigorously so it doesn't run over, so it doesn't burn. The smell in the closet changes. Now it smells not just of kitchen and lard, but of a summer meadow, heat, bitterness, and medicine. You must cook this for a very long time on the lowest fire so that the mixture only slightly shudders, simmers, so that all the healing power of the herb passes into the fat. An hour, two, time loses meaning. You simply sit on a low bench, looking at the glowing red coals and mechanically stirring the brew. Your eyelids grow heavy. The heat from the hearth makes you drowsy, wraps you in a stifling blanket. You hear someone chopping wood for the kitchen somewhere far away in the courtyard behind the wall. A dull thud of an axe, a pause, the crack of a splitting log, a thud, a pause. This is the rhythm of monastery life, slow, unchanging for centuries, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. When the ointment is finally ready, you take a piece of clean but coarse linen and strain the brew into a small clay jar. The linen stains a dark, dirty green, almost brown color. The hot ointment flows in a thin, oily stream, the remains of the boiled herb, greasy, hot, shapeless. You throw directly into the fire. They flare up with a bright, cheerful flame, momentarily illuminating your tired face, covered with a layer of soot, sweat, and deep wrinkles. The ointment in the jar slowly cools, solidifies, becoming dense, matte, opaque. It will heal, draw out pus, or at least cover the wound from annoying flies and road dirt. You tightly close the jar with a piece of oiled leather and tie it tightly with twine, tying a complex knot. Your hands tremble noticeably from tension and fatigue. The day leans towards sunset. Shadows in the corners of the room lengthen, become thick, viscous, like black bile crawling out of the cracks. You extinguish the fire in the hearth, carefully pouring water from a ladle over the coals. A loud hiss and a column of thick steam is the last loud sound in your work today. The steam smells of wet ash, cooling stone, and wet clay. You go out into the courtyard. The evening air is cool. It brings relief to skin heated by the hearth. But you know this cold is dangerous and deceptive. The evening air is damp. It can bring fever or inflammation of the lungs. Beyond the high walls of the monastery, the world plunges into darkness. There, in the endless forests, wolves begin to howl. There, robbers lie in wait for belated travelers. There, invisible poisonous miasmas rise from rotten swamps, carrying death and pestilence to villages. But here, inside stone walls, order reigns, cruel, boring, monotonous, but reliable order. You hear the tolling of the bell for vespers. Again, this sound from which there is no escape. Bim, bom, slow, heavy strikes. It measures time, which flows away irrevocably, like dry sand through fingers. You go to the chapel, then to the refectory. The food in the evening is even simpler than in the day. Leftovers of lentil soup, which has already cooled and filmed over. A piece of bread and water diluted with weak sour beer so as not to get sick from dampness and bad water. You will eat silently, slowly chewing food, listening to the reading of the life of yet another holy martyr who was probably tortured even more sophisticatedly and cruelly than you are tortured by your daily, endless routine. You feel your leg muscles ache, your swollen feet buzz. You sit at a long, massive wooden table, polished by the elbows of thousands of brothers before you, in twilight barely dispelled by rare tallow candles. The smell of boiled lentils mixes with the smell of unwashed bodies, old wool, and humility. It is the smell of brotherhood. After the meal and the last long prayer, during which you fought sleep, you return to your freezing cell. The darkness here is absolute, dense. You can't see a thing. If you don't light a splinter, you won't even see your own hand. But burning a splinter is wasteful and sinful without need. You find your bed by touch, by memory. The straw in the mattress rustles loudly under your weight. Dry stems prick through the thin, washed out sheet, digging into your sides. You lie on your back with difficulty, stretch out your buzzing legs, and fold your hands on your chest like a corpse. The silence outside the monastery walls presses on your ears with its heaviness. Sometimes you hear the distant, mournful cry of a night bird or the creak of an old tree in the wind. But most often you hear only your own wheezing breath and the dull, slowing beating of your heart. Thump, 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 thump. You lie in the dark and think about tomorrow. Tomorrow you will need to gather valerian roots. This is heavy, dirty work. You need to dig deep into the most viscous mud to get these tangled, smelly brown clumps that soothe nerves and drive away cramps. You already imagine how the sharp shovel enters the earth with a crunch, cutting the sod, how you bend down, how you shake off heavy clumps of clay with your hands, how the smell of valerian, resembling the smell of dirty socks, hits your nose. You run through the endless list of tasks in your mind. Check the mint for beetles, tie up the fallen beans, crush oak bark for a decoction against bloody diarrhea, sort through dried chamomile. The list is endless. It will not end while you are alive. And when you die, another brother, just as faceless and tired, will take your place. Put on your worn-out sandals, take your worn hoe, and continue this endless, senseless war with weeds, diseases, and decay. You close your eyes. The smell of herbs still haunts you. It has eaten into the pores of your skin, into your hair, into your very essence. Sage, hyssop, lavender, wormwood, hot, dry, wet, cold. The elements of the world swirl in a slow, viscous dance. Four humors flow in your body, striving for a shaky peace. You feel leaden heaviness fall on your eyelids. Feel your body, exhausted by the day's labor, begin to reluctantly relax, sinking into black non-existence without dreams. Tomorrow there will be the bell tolling again. Tomorrow there will be the cold of the stone again. Tomorrow there will be mud again. But that will be tomorrow. And now there is only saving darkness, the quiet rustling of straw under your ear, and the lingering smell of wax on your fingertips. Sleep comes not as a friend or comforter, but as an inevitability, like dark, cold water slowly covering your head, filling your lungs. And in this dense darkness, you finally stop feeling the aching pain in your back. Forget about rotting ulcers, about the Black Death, about your petty sins. You dissolve into the absolute silence of the medieval night, becoming part of this cold stone, this damp earth, this endless, monotonous cycle, that will rotate for hundreds of years after your name, written in faded ink, is erased from the pages of monastery books by indifferent worms and inexorable time.